When it comes to mixed-use tires, a variety of misunderstandings often come up. That's because tire categories are identified for convenience, with percentages that indicate possible intended uses: 70-30, 60-40. This particular mindset and way of thinking can lead people to visualize and imagine the extreme uses of these percentages. So what did we do? We took these Eurogrip Trailhound Wild tires. We mounted them on a KTM 890, which is a bike that's suitable for a bit of everything, both on-road and off-road, to really understand what this means. 70-30 in concrete terms, and then in everyday use on the road. Whether it's for road track use or versatile road and off-road environments, as in this specific case with the Trailhound Wild, or the percentage serves as a precise indicator for the exact type of use that I can make of it. So, when we read that this tire is a 70-30, we immediately imagine it in the two extreme conditions: on the road, on a mountain pass, just as you lean it over enough to scrape the foot pegs. And right after, in a challenging, super fun off-road setting, or on the white gravel roads of the Tuscan hills. All of this, of course, is related to the percentage mentioned above. So for 70% of the time, I'll be on the road leaning into turns and scraping the foot pegs. And for the remaining 30%, I'll be off-road. And the effort we sometimes make is to figure out how much time I'll spend doing one thing and how much doing the other. In fact, by testing these tires, we've already put about 1,000 kilometers on them in all sorts of conditions, even a stretch on snow. Actually, I realized that their main intended use isn't at either of the two extremes. Instead, it is really all about those subtle nuances in between. This is especially true in a country like Italy, where we have an absolutely huge number of secondary backroads. It is truly incredible to see them, and they exist in the most varied conditions imaginable because they are so often in bad shape with uneven patches, loose gravel, old repairs, deep potholes, and everything else you might expect to find on the road. Well, that specific kind of mixed condition is the perfect environment for using these tires. Now let's take a look at how they're made from a slightly more technical point of view. They have a radial internal structure with 0-degree steel belts and a reinforced construction, which effectively helps to maintain their shape even at very high speeds. And also when carrying luggage, a passenger or other heavy loads. So, when the motorcycle weighs much more, from a chemical standpoint, the rear tire features a dual compound across all available sizes. So there is a harder central section and a softer side section, as we have now come to know with dual compound tires. What is particularly interesting to note is that the percentage of silica progressively increases. So there is more silica on the shoulders than in the center in order to significantly enhance chemical grip on wet and damp asphalt, especially when cornering. So on the straight, where it's a bit less essential, there's a lower percentage, while on the shoulders there's a higher percentage. The overall structural design, as you can clearly see, let's say they're not really standard tread blocks anymore, but rather consist of very wide and deep grooves. This specific design at the rear is exceptionally effective and beneficial for providing maximum traction during acceleration, even on dirty surfaces or mild off-road terrain conditions. And at the front, instead, it serves to provide grip during braking. The configuration of the grooves is also distinctly irregular, to make it easier and more efficient to expel mud and water. So when it needs to drain, obviously slippery mud is not its playground, because if the tread blocks aren't very pronounced, tires generally face their greatest challenges in those conditions. But let's say it was also specifically designed to handle those slightly more extreme situations. So how do they actually perform on the road? Let's start by looking at their specific use on asphalt. The first thing that really struck me is how smoothly and predictably they lean into corners. Even when brand new, whereas with some tires you sometimes get that feeling that as soon as you mount them you fall into the turn. With these I found a very interesting linearity right at the corner entry. So you don't get either the sensation of falling in, nor that slightly annoying self-uprighting effect. So from that point of view, they are very linear, and I like the sense of direction they provide. You can lean into corners very well and keep the brake engaged even up to the middle of the turn, so you can enter aggressively even though the tread pattern is quite pronounced. The lateral grip is sufficient to enter at speed with the brakes pulled. Then even when exiting the corner and opening the throttle again, the power delivery is very gradual, so I really like this smoothness. Two other positive points I liked. First, stability. Not everyone knows this particular KTM isn't exactly a razor on the straight. Often with certain tires, the front end especially can be a bit unstable at high speeds or even at 70 to 80 kilometers per hour when you let off the throttle. Every now and then, the front end tends to wobble a bit. With these particular tires, I actually haven't noticed this issue. In fact, you can easily take your hands off the handlebars. The handlebars stay perfectly still at highway speeds of 130 kilometers per hour, even with panniers. Specifically, during that critical KTM phase at 70 to 80 kilometers per hour, when letting off the throttle, this defect did not occur. Both the stability and the noise level are excellent. You don't hear it, although it's also true that this bike doesn't have a very pronounced windshield. So once you start reaching a certain high speed, you begin to hear a lot of wind noise, which might easily cover up any tire noise if there even were any. But even with the visor wide open, that distinctive low-frequency rolling hum can't be heard. So they get top marks for quietness, stability, and overall handling. So I really like them, especially for the specific kind of use I mentioned earlier, which is the versatile mixed riding that happens most often. When you take it out for a long ride on the bike, they're an absolute blast to ride. On twisty roads, they're remarkably stable and planted at higher speeds. Maybe the only minor drawback or slight weakness I've noticed is on wet white lines. There's not much you can do there, but you do feel it's a bit slippery in that particular situation. Whereas on wet asphalt, they performed well. Of course, when it rains and the asphalt is really wet, you don't go around acting crazy to find the tire's limit, but they do give you a good sense of security. But the specific condition that really surprised me is the so-called damp dry state. When perhaps it rained quite heavily during the night and then early in the morning, the dark asphalt is just starting to dry out slowly. And there are those dark and light patches where you never really know if you can trust them or not, if they grip or not. But after a while, you get comfortable, you get into it, and the tires perform very well. There's grip, and they give you a real sense of security, even in those conditions. A bit mixed. Now let's take a moment to discuss exactly how these vehicles perform when the asphalt ends. When we head off-road, let's just say they maintain a very honest and precise attitude for what they are. Obviously, you can't expect the performance of a pure, dedicated, knobby tire, so I don't expect to tackle extremely challenging off-road trails or steep mule tracks with them, also because they are simply not made for that. These are primarily touring and adventure touring tires, so they are perfectly suited for light off-road use. We found them interesting both on gravel roads, where they have good traction, as we saw earlier, thanks to the longitudinal rear tread pattern that provides great grip during acceleration, but also during braking on the front tire. They also gave us a good sense of confidence on packed terrain, on hard-packed dirt. They hold very well even in corners. So the sidewall of the front tire does a good job and manages to provide good steering precision, obviously. But if the gravel becomes too much or the stones get a bit bigger, at that point, the tread block can't handle it and it becomes a bit more unstable, but you can still tackle pretty much all types of terrain. As we said before, the Achilles heel is a bit the mud, but that's the case for almost all tires with not too large tread blocks because they fill up pretty quickly. And that's when it begins to lose its grip a bit. However, as soon as you get back on the road after traveling just 10 meters or so of picking up a bit of speed, the mud is flung off and expelled almost immediately. So these aren't tires. When you are driving off-road, they are not exactly tires designed for sporty driving, but they are certainly tires that are well suited for long-distance traveling, adventure, so setting off, not knowing what kind of road I'll find. These are good for just about everything, that 70-30 split we talked about earlier. What I found to be most interesting about these tires is that, in fact, they really fit perfectly within this 70-30 range. So I don't have to try to imagine one extreme or the other, but rather the whole endless spectrum in between. So within that, the little roads of the Apennines, poorly maintained, gravel patches, the repairs, those joints you find between stretches of asphalt. Basically all those situations which are actually the conditions we encounter in real-world motorcycle use. And so I think these Trailhound Wild are the perfect tire for the imperfect.